Are you getting an affirmative? Hello?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, so I guess yours was on.
You may have to just speak
Okay.
up a little.
All right, I'm hot.
Elevate it if you want, maybe. There you go. I'm going to turn the lights down.
John, can you play that black bar across the top? The transfer bar?
Hit the X.
There you go.
I'm very old school. This technology stuff kind of scares me. So thank you guys for having me here today. I'm excited to be here. I have worked with John quite a bit in the past. Audubon's been a fantastic partner for us in Raleigh Parks in general, but also for me in my former position as the invasive program coordinator. So thanks. Number one, I have been with the city for 20 years. I have been in the city my entire life. I grew up in the woods off of Lake Johnson. Grew up playing on the construction site that was the Beltline, was to become the Beltline. So just to age myself a little bit. Little louder. Okay. All right. Project more. I'm talking to myself here. Okay. So yeah, I grew up in the woods off Lake Johnson. Back in the day when mom and daddy would just say, just go into the woods. So I spent my formative years just wandering in the woods and would come back at dark. I transitioned from that into being a junior curator here at the Museum of Natural Sciences, which was wonderful and a great experience. And then I was fortunate enough to find my way into the general horticultural world and eventually to the Raleigh Rose Garden, which was my intro into Raleigh Parks. So for 20 years, I've had several positions, finally landing for the second time into urban forestry. So I'm here to talk to you about invasive plants because it's October, it's spooky season, so let's do this. I had a little bit of fun with my slides because why not? So please forgive my little indulgences. So a little bit of an overview for Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. We offer services for everybody at every age, interest, and ability level, from newborn swim classes to working cemeteries. We like to say we've got you from the cradle to the grave. And those are all very important services and programs, but you can find those in most locations. In my mind, the most important thing that we can offer our patrons is easy access to natural environments in their own neighborhoods within walking distance. So having high quality natural spaces, high quality, mind you, that you can get to easily is important for mental and physical health and should be available to everyone. Not all of us have the time, money, or opportunity to travel to a state or national park. And this unique city service is invaluable to the overall quality of life for our community. And these are just some snapshots from our parks. A lot of people think basketball courts. Nope, we're more than that. Some stats on Raleigh. Of the departments, we've got 10,000 acres as parks, parks and greenways. 6,140, and yes, I know the exact acreage, 6,140 acres of that is wild. These are our forests, our meadows, and our wetlands. It's roughly 1/3 of the remaining undeveloped land in the city. The map of Raleigh on the right is USGS land cover data. The pink through red colors are developed areas. The greens are the remaining forest. These data show that over the last 18 to 19 years, Raleigh developed 7,000 acres of forest. So it's a 28% loss. Only 17,000 acres of forest remain within the city limits. Here's a countywide view of the built environment. The large green blob at the northwest corner of Raleigh is Umstead State Park. And you can see that while there are some connecting bits of forest, there are areas with no connectivity, which is something we all realize is terrible for wildlife. And if these corridors, and many of them are degraded with turbid waterways and invasive plants, it's not much better, even if they are connected. So here's a staggering number for you. I love a good stat, don't you? The cost to create a new forest is $100,000 an acre. an acre. And keep in mind, you don't just go to a big box store and say, I would like an acre of forest, please. So the cost to preserve an existing forest is far less. We all know everybody loves to plant a tree, but I like to encourage people to let trees regenerate naturally. It's much cheaper, it's much easier on your back, and they do it for free. A healthy forest is an investment in the future, a future where tree canopy regenerates and diverse ecosystems supporting many species can thrive. Again, healthy ecosystems cannot simply be purchased. So, I always like to do the remedial. What about invasive species? Invasive plants are, like many species, very quick to exploit an opportunity. When land is disturbed, either by man or by nature, invasive species jump right in. Often they hitchhike on dirty equipment, recreational gear, clothing, fur, or in the stomach of some hungry critter. Native ecosystems evolved over thousands of years, developing complex relationships that are deeply interdependent. An introduced species has no native predators or diseases and can therefore overtake a disturbed area much more quickly than many native species. So many people are familiar with this chart of the invasion curve. It takes a while for a species to show its true spooky colors. And by the time many people notice, we're often well into asset-based protection, meaning protect your rare, you're threatened, you're endangered, or the protect the best philosophy. Every dollar now can save $5 to $100 in future management practices. So with the City of Raleigh Parks system, we deploy a lot of diverse resource management techniques, pre-development assessments, which is difficult to say, can help us identify what exists on our new properties, our soil types. We get inventories of species, habitat types, and all that helps guide future site use and stewardship and management goals. I call this the just words phase, because while policy is very important, it has to be backed by practice. This is actually my least favorite phase. I just like to get out and do. I don't want to sit in a room and talk about doing. It's just a person, not a policy person. That's why I'm in the field. So actions are really where the fun begins, and real change can begin to happen. So we use fire where appropriate in management of meadows or short and longleaf pine populations. We do targeted thinning to enhance oak hickory stands. We do, regular tons of trail maintenance. And of course we do invasive species management. And unfortunately, we do leave all of these parks outside just laying around, and people get into them. And so we have to manage for the people to more challenging than you might imagine. Integrated pest management is a targeted approach to invasive management. The idea is to weigh the benefits of all your available options and use the most effective tool deployable with the resources that you have. Considerations include site factors such as ease of access, presence of water, and ultimate management goals. Manual and mechanical controls are great if you can get equipment to the site. But keep in mind, if you've got to walk to the backside of Durant Nature Preserve with a big old chainsaw and some bar oil and a can of gas, you're not going to make it. Not at my age. I don't know. Maybe y'all can, but those days for me are over. But mechanical, mowing, cutting, tilling, some of those things can be very effective depending on what your target species is and the efficacy of that approach. But keep in mind, you want to clean your equipment between your sites, even between micro ecosystems within one larger park site, so that you're not moving seeds or other propagules throughout the site. Targeted chemical control. I can get it out. I really can't speak. It has been proven effective for some species, and there are some weed-specific herbicides that can narrow the range of affected plants within a habitat. For example, there's legume-specific herbicides that are really helpful for plants like mimosa or Asian wisterias. There are some grass-selective herbicides that have been proven very effective for control of Japanese stiltgrass that don't harm native orchids, don't harm ferns, don't harm vines, don't harm all of these very, very sensitive species when used at a very, very low rate. Japanese stiltgrass is very easy to kill. You just look at it wrong. Say something ugly about its mom. But it's very easy to kill. And we've tried out these approaches in various places, even trying them out at very sensitive habitats like Annie Louise Nature Preserve. So if you're very thoughtful about your approach, you can use a lot of different tools. Hand pulling is also very effective for some species as well. Just get on your hands and knees and start pulling, right? There's all kinds of different ways to think about it. You can solarize some species. You can smother some species. I've even had success flooding some species with species that do not tolerate wet feet. And of course, we use stump treatment, so we're not always rolling the rock back uphill, right? We don't want to be Sisyphus. We don't want to just keep pushing that boulder. If you're going to cut it down, go ahead and treat it so it doesn't resprout, because that's the most frustrating thing ever, is to come back to a site year after year after year. If you're absolutely anti-herbicide, that's fine, but you're just going to have to keep cutting until you deplete the resources within that plant's root system. It can be effective. It just takes longer. If you have the resources to do that, do that. And then, of course, developing relationships with volunteer groups or even invested neighbors near a site is very important. But it comes with its own considerations. Are you able to keep up the communications? Is your group, knowledgeable enough to know what they're doing, or do they need like a more hands-on approach? Our Greenway Vegetation Unit did a really thorough survey of our greenway system. Okay, technology, yes, no, wherever you fall on that curve. But the GIS tools that are out there and are available, we use a quick capture. It's just yes or no, does it exist? And you could go 55 miles an hour down a freeway and you can just, yes, mimosa, yes, mimosa, yes, mimosa. And you can pull all this lovely, lovely data. It's very effective, and it helps us manage our treatment calendars. So we know where to go, when to go to treat what. And this is one of my little tiny, but it's a success story. This is Marshall Street Park. It's near Mordecai. And it really was just, you can see the before pictures. It was just a dense, choked, just unhealthy little channelized corridor of waterway. And with the help of the neighbors, it is now a thriving, beautiful space. We've planted back lots of native species. We put in a bunch of service berries and other fruit-bearing trees and shrubs because we wanted the birds, and also because I don't know if you know John Connor, but he lives in that neighborhood and he was breathing down my throat. Hi, John, if you're there. But you can see that even a highly degraded urban site can be hiding some beautiful treasures. You just have to uncover it. It's just putting in the sweat equity. So because we're doing our spooky invasives, I thought that I would talk about the up and coming things to be afraid of, because we don't already have enough. As you can see from this picture, this is not Photoshop. This is an actual live adult-sized human being next to a single Elaeagnus. I'm just gonna let that sink in for a second. So when you say it's a shrub, I would say it's a viney shrub, and it eats trees. I've seen some stuff. I've seen some stuff. So Johnson grass. It's not a new one. We've heard about it for a long time. It really started to show up in 2021. I call that the year of the Johnson grass and the mimosa, because that is when in our area, those two species really were just like, yep, I'm invasive, by the way. Before then, I would just see like one or two individuals here and there. But that 2021 year, it was just like, that was when I realized that Highway 70 going down to the coast is nothing but a corridor of mimosa. And it was shocking. Johnson grass, it's one of the 10 world's worst. So you got to be something to be 10 globally, right? To be on that list. It's native to Africa and Asia. The nasty little plant that spread to absolutely every continent except Antarctica. So think what you want about that. It's a survivor, right? It was planted intentionally in the 1830s for forage. Turned out it was terrible for that. And also for erosion control. And guess where it was introduced first? Alabama and North Carolina. Okay. We're leaders in innovation. It's now in 41 states in the US, and it's spread to Canada, Central and South America. Truly starting to show dominance. It can be difficult to control. Its sharply pointed rhizomes will poke through like any kind of smothering agent you're trying to use, mulch, cardboard, newspaper, whatever your preferred smothering agent is. It's like, nah. And it's got a very, very persistent seed bank. The seeds are viable up to 10 years. So once you've got it, if you let it go to seed, you've got it for another 10 years at least. It's a legacy plant. It's also showing a lot of resistance to many herbicides because it's an agricultural pest. It's been treated by farmers throughout the country with a lot of different herbicides. And so now the grass is developing resistance. So herbicides are no longer very effective on this plant. Aggressive tilling can help control. Of course, mowing, because it has to be a certain height to set seed. So you can just mow it while it's in flower to prevent the seed, at least. You won't get rid of the plant, but you gotta take what you can get. If you can get to it to mow. Or if you just can't even do that, just snipping off the seed heads as they form. But honestly, it's not considered one of the world's worst for no reason. Burning seems to encourage it. Do what? In flower, maybe 4.5. Yeah. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. And if you try to pull it, it'll cut you. So there's that. I love the thorny, spiky invasive plants. Those are great. So mimosa, we'll just talk about it. It's been around for a long time, but it is really, really starting to become a problem. And I'm super sick of this tree. I'm over it. I'm done. Like, close the book on it. The seeds are wind dispersed, which is why I believe a lot of the highways and roadways are coated with it, because I believe, heavy traffic bringing winds behind it is helping disperse the seeds through those highway and roadway corridors. That's my theory. Like I said, Highway 70, it's just a hallway of mimosas, and they're stretched out over the road because that's just sort of their habit. And unfortunately, it's going to cost DOT a whole lot of money to control those plants as they impede the roadway. And guess what? DOT gets its budget from us. So it's not always just about native ecosystems and healthy ecosystems. Sometimes it's about your wallet and your safety. So not everybody is as environmentally focused as some of us are. And so I always like to say, oh, and by the way, it can hurt you and it can cost you money, because people then tend to sit up and pay attention. This is not a difficult plant to manage when it's small. They're very easy to pull. The wood, they grow so quickly. The wood is really soft. They're very easy to cut through and treat. Really easy to burn in your fire pit too. But if you're going to cut them, again, go ahead and treat that stump. I use a little, it's almost like a bingo dauber, like the little spongy things, so that you don't get any drip or anything from your herbicide. You just put your little bingo on there and just like dab your herbicide around the cambium layer on the outside. So you don't have to treat the entire stump, because that wood in the middle is just holding wood. So you just want to treat that cambium layer on the outside. So it's actually pretty cheap. This is what makes me angry too, is if you look to the corner there, you could still buy it. And I don't know why anybody would pay for a mimosa when you can just walk outside and pull one up, should one really desire one. But if you look at the far end, there's another one, Tree of Heaven, for sale. And again, that's criminal if you ask me, A, from an ecological standpoint, but B, making money off of something that is so prolific that, you know, like, come on, that's just criminal. Air potatoes. This is a fun one. They're found in a lot of wetter areas, although I'm seeing them encroach into drier areas as well. There's several Dioscorea species that are considered to be invasive. Air potatoes, Chinese yam, there's a couple of different ones. They all sort of look similar. They all sort of do the same thing. And as the name suggests, they do produce tiny tubers along the length of the vine, which can then break off and start new plants. It's a very aggressive spreader, moves very quickly, grows very, very fast. They climb and smother young trees, which prevents the regeneration of the next forest, which is unfortunate because if you're going into a restoration phase on a site and you just planted like 500 trees and then you come out the next spring and they're all like bent over and covered in air potato and you're like, oh, then you spend the next day and a half cutting air potato vines off your baby trees. It's just, it's difficult. But it is easy to pull even when mature. And you don't always have to pull it off of your baby trees or your shrubs or whatever it's using to scramble. You can just cut it at the ground and let the rest die. And typically the roots don't tend to resprout that easily. So pulling it's a great way to manage it. And researchers are testing a biological control, oddly enough, known as the air potato beetle. Who would have seen that coming? And it has been showing some success. Becaria verna, I've got to beat this drum, partly because this has been my thing for the last 7 years, is chasing this one down. We can still stop this little yellow menace. It's not been around in this state for that long. We've got a coalition of local government and private stakeholders within this area that's covering like from Greensboro to Johnson County kind of thing. And we've been mapping, providing educational tools, and doing treatments in the Piedmont for the past 5 years. One of the funnest things about this is because it's up in like February, it's a spring ephemeral. You get to put on your waders, your hip waders, and get into the creek when it's February, which is awesome, and go and treat the fig buttercup. But I think we've been very effective. A lot more people are noticing. This is a true grandma plant. This is one that I say, like, my grandmother would have been like, hey, I found this beautiful yellow plant. And she would give it to all of her friends, and they would give it to all of their friends. And I swear to you, I have talked to so many people who are like, yeah, I'm sorry, I knew that was a problem, but I did give that to all my friends. And, you know, that's why education is such a big piece of this, right? But this is the iNat points from this year, from this past spring. This is from iNaturalist. This is showing where it is in our area. If you go back historically, you can see it's spread over time. This is not great, but trust me, it's not Maryland bad. Maryland is pretty much a red dot on the map. So we don't want to get there. We want to go ahead and stop this guy now. That's Maryland. So we do not want to end up like that. So the Paulonia, the Empress tree, is so pretty. It's not. So it's invasive from Montreal to Florida. It can get 60 feet tall. They do look a lot like the catalpas when they're not in flower. The thing to keep in mind is the catalpa is a pea, so it blooms down, fruits down. Paulonia, not a pea, so it blooms up, fruits up. Introduced as an ornamental from Asia in the 1840s. It's now a major threat to disturb sites and occurring a lot more frequently in our area. If you think of all the development sites where the forest has been removed and you watch for plants like this to move in. This is at the foundation of Theater in the Park, which is at Pullen Park in Raleigh, where one plant was allowed to grow because the person thought it was a catalpa and it wasn't. And now we have this. The little red arrow is just showing the toothed leaf, which is the difference between it and the catalpa. That's another good identification tool. Cut and treat is really the best way to manage this plant. Cut it as low as possible. Use your dauber bottle. Put some herbicide on it. You can girdle it too. That's just a little bit more time consuming. Just take your chainsaw and go all the way around the stem and cut the flow of the cambium layers. And don't wait to treat the stump, as it'll heal over quickly. Don't cut it and then be like, I'm gonna go get a sandwich and come back later. Don't do that. Cut it, treat it, and then go get your sandwich. And again, if you want to, you can buy it from all the sources for ridiculous amounts of money, if you ask me. The Japanese hop vine. This is just, I noticed it about 8 years ago. It's the first time I kind of saw it. I had read about it maybe in some magazines, some articles and stuff like that, but I didn't really see it here in Raleigh. About 8 years ago, I was like, oh, that looks, oh no, that is. It's an annual vine. It quickly invades riparian areas. It's eating our entire greenway system here in Raleigh. It has a prominent foothold in our wetlands. When you get rid of here's my experience, personal experience. I get rid of the kudzu, this is what comes in. I call it the hamster wheel of invasive management. Once you get on, you don't get off until you go to urban forestry. It's very easy to pull from a mechanical standpoint, because it's an annual. It doesn't really have like a huge vigorous root system. Very, very easy to pull. But it's covered in fine hairs that will cut you. Every part of this plant. So it's not like you can just grab the stem and you're fine, or you can just grab the leaf and you're fine. Oh no. You want, despite the fact that it's summer and you're in a riparian area and it's just miserable and hot, you want long sleeves, you want leather gloves, you want long pants. Trust me, at least it'll keep you safe from the mosquitoes too. But yeah, this plant is bad. A friend of mine thinks that this plant came from the local brewery fad that's been happening, because people will plant it as an ornamental over the doors to their brewery. So he's always shaking his fingers at the local brewery. Don't plant that. Nandina, it's an oldie but a goodie. This is me having some fun at the Rose Garden just because they had a hedge of it. I was trying to get them to cut it down. We finally did some renovations and it's gone. And we all know about this, but I just like to remind people that the berries do have a certain level of cyanide, and if birds do like to eat it because it's bright red and they're like, ooh, red, I should eat that. And a little bit is not necessarily a problem for them, but there have been reports of large numbers of bird kills, like waxwings and those other berry eaters, dying because the ecosystem that they were in at the time didn't have available native fruit for them. So they gorged themselves on the nandinas and they died. So I like to point this out because people have feelings about this plant. And that's okay. You can have feelings about it and you can keep it if you want. That's fine, but you got to cut the berries off. That's all I'm going to ask. It's very hard to dig out. It's very hard to get all of the root system when you do dig it out. I have not found an herbicide that will touch it. It's really best management. Keep it from spreading. Keep it from getting to the birds. That's a big one. Japanese knotweed. Do we know this one? This one's been coming for a while. Actually, in England, it's such a problem that it will lower the value of your property if you have this on your property. We have this at least 4 of our sites. We've been able to manage somewhat effectively. This is a power line easement, where maybe Duke Energy isn't quite as proactive. Maybe. I'm not going to cast any shade on Duke Energy, but I'm just saying, I don't know what kind of program they have, but they do have some very healthy knotweed. It's a multi-pronged approach for management with this. You cut it or mow it, you let it regrow a little bit, because these plants are over your head. These plants are 7-8 feet tall in a healthy stand. So you need to cut it and mow it, then do an herbicide treatment. And then we have been working with a researcher with the Department of Ag who has been trialing a psyllid, which is an insect that will eat the plant. So between the cutting, the mowing, and the psyllid releases, we're trying to get control of it. It's a tough one. We have had some success. Nobody wants to hear this. I really don't like crepe myrtles. And now I have a reason. The picture in the middle is Horseshoe Farm Nature Preserve. That's their meadow. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that property. It's great for bird watching. It's a really, really beautiful, unique site that has crepe myrtles popping up in the meadow. There was never crepe myrtles planted there. That was previously farmland. And it was not a nursery growing crepe myrtles. So again, theory, I have a lot of theories. My theory is the birds have finally figured out that they can eat the seeds. And it just took the scarification of going through their system to be able to germinate. I don't know. I'm not a researcher or scientist. But the cool thing about that is that if you look at the picture over there with the little white dots all over it, that's crepe myrtle bark scale. Let's hear it. Yeah, it came in Texas in like 2009, and I've just been waiting. I've been waiting. I was going to go down to Florida and get some. But it finally got to us. And this is in downtown where the trees are already having a tough life, so they're going to be more susceptible to pests. But I've seen it as far out as Creedmoor Road out in North Raleigh. So I'm seeing it everywhere. It's a treatable insect, but most people don't want to pay to do it. The people downtown on Hillsborough Street, I just told them to just wash the sooty mold off the trunk. This is a smooth bark tree. Don't bother managing it. Just wash your tree. Tree of Heaven. It's far from heavenly. And yet, as we saw, it is still for sale. They give off a less than pleasant odor. It's very, very memorable. It rapidly invades disturbed sites and forest edges. And I will bet anybody in this room $5 right now that it is not on every single DOT construction site. Every single one. Drive around the Beltline. Tell me I'm wrong. It's allelopathic. So it releases chemicals into the soil that prevent other plants from growing. That's not good. I mean, okay, hickory does it too, but like that's okay when a hickory does it. It's very, very aggressive root systems that can damage structures, buildings, foundations, roads. It's a prolific cedar. It resprouts like a hydra. Just basal bark treatments are the best way to manage this. I promise you, if you cut this plant, by the time you have reached for your dauber bottle to treat that stump, it is already resprouted. I can promise you. This thing is wily. So a basal bark treatment, just a little bit of herbicide and whatever your favorite carrier oil is, just go all the way around the trunk, kill it, you're done. Or you could pave it. That's another option. Just put some asphalt on it and call it a day. And unfortunately, it's the main host for spotted lanternfly, which is coming. So if you don't know about it, it's coming. You'll find out soon. It's been in the news a lot recently. It spread from Pennsylvania in 2014 down to us with the first sighting a little over a year and a half ago in North Carolina. Major agricultural pest and setting off alarm bells in our grape industry. It seeks out Tree of Heaven to lay its eggs. So if we can get rid of the Tree of Heaven, maybe we can help control the spread of the spotted lanternfly. Right? Are we all in on this? Yeah, love it. Nasty little bugs. So I'm sure everybody knows about this, at least one of them, if not all of these. INAT is great. Seek will sometimes lie to you. I don't know if you guys have tried that, and it'll be like, it's a dock or whatever. And you're like, that's not a dock. But they're free, they're easy to use. Picture this will tell you that you need to pay for it, but you just skip that bit and it'll just work anyway. So just I'm cheap. What can I say? They're really helpful to map invasions. A lot of our GIS wizards, they can pull the information out of here so we can identify other people's observations from just within our own parks. So we don't have to always be collecting our own data, which is great. It's a citizen science driven model, and it does give a lot of scientists large data sets to work with. Seek is a really fun way to get kids into nature, like these tech hungry kids. You just be like, because it's sort of like a game model where they can win awards and badges and stuff like that. And actually, it works on big kids because me and my coworkers always like, I got my insect badge today. And, they're like, well, I'm a gold, and I'm like, well, I'm just a silver, but okay. So it's fun for everybody. Just an easy way to get kids out into nature and getting them learning about stuff. Here's some sites that you can look at for just different stuff. Bugwood is great. Native Plant Society. The Non-Native Invasive Plants of Southern Forest Field Guide is put out by the Forest Service. It is a fantastic book. It's got an identification book, and then it also has a management book that walks you through all the techniques, how to do what, when to do what, how to, all the little nitty gritties. It's a very, really good resource. And I'm that person. I'll like every now and again on like my Facebook or my Instagram, and I'll just throw in a link, and then all my family and friends have to look at it. And then they're like, oh, Leigh, that's okay. They'll get over it. But what can you do, right? What can we all do? Everybody thinks of it. It's like, oh, this is just such a crushing thought. It's an awful thing, and we're just never going to get ahead of it. But the thing is it didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to get better overnight. But if we don't do anything, it's never going to get better. So one of the things I like to encourage people to do is when you're going plant shopping, ask for your native plants. It's a really fun game that I like to play that my partner rolls his eyes every single time we go to Lowe's. And I'm like, excuse me, where's your native plant section? And he's like, oh. And they're like, what? I'm like, you need some native plants. It's a really fun way to embarrass your loved ones. But these are commercial enterprises, right? Like they want to fill demand. That's how they make their money. And so if we're demanding the product, they will provide it for us. We can't wait for them to bring it to us. We have to ask for it. Of course, always remove the invasive species in your own yard where possible. And if you can't remove it or don't want to, right? If you got an Andina that you just love, render it harmless by removing the seeds, right? Like if that's all you can do, if you're like, I have 5 minutes, I do not have time to dig this out or pull this out or whatever, just see what you can get from the seeds, right? Every little bit. You can be that person. You can talk to all your friends and neighbors, and you can get up on your soapbox and you can do that. I have found over many years that yes, it is annoying, but eventually people learn. And then they're like, yeah, I was driving and I saw those calorie pears blooming and you were right. So speaking to people and getting them engaged, even if they are annoyed by you, they still love you and they will put up with you and they will learn. And talk to your neighbors if you have a conservation area, like a dedicated tree conservation area or some sort of neighborhood like forested area or little area that your HOA owns. Talk to them about getting together. There are neighborhood enrichment funds if you happen to live in Raleigh that you can use as a grant from the city of Raleigh to help do invasive management. So you can hire a contractor if your neighbors aren't interested in helping. But that's easy ways that we can protect these like smaller little pocket forests that we've got all over the place. And then this is my favorite one because people are like, I don't even know how to do that. But promote wildlife friendly gardens at your schools, at your church, at your grocery store, at all these places, because what happens is people like to go to beautiful places. People like to shop at beautiful places. And if they pull into the parking lot and it's just teeming with, berries and fruit and flowers and gorgeous, they're going to be like, oh, I want to come back to this Food Lion. Right? So you can have those conversations with people and people actually will listen to you to some degree. So it's pretty interesting. So with that, any questions? Anybody just want to yell at me?
As much as the question, when you cut those man-made berries, do not put them in compost bin, put them in the landfill bin. all the other invasives you're talking about.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. You never want to put those Nandina berries into your compost. You don't want to give them the opportunity to grow in a very fertile environment. I also do not encourage sending your invasive plants to yard waste. They try to compost the best that they can, but they're a large operation and they're not plant people. They don't really know. So put it in the trash, honestly. And if you know, then that's not all of the plant. Like if you cut down a big ligustrum and you can just cut the berries off and send the rest of it to landfill, that's fine. Ligustrums can have a lot of fruit on them, so that could be a daunting task. But be very thoughtful about the way that you're planning to dispose of your invasive plants. Yeah, very good point. Thank you. There is a risk of using biocontrol agents that are not native that they could get out. And that's why we let the researchers manage that. And they do a lot of that in the lab first, and they test a whole bunch of stuff. And it can be decades of testing before widespread releases are really happening. So we just have started using the controls for the emerald ash borer here in Wake County the past couple of years. And so that's been decades coming to us. The psyllids, like I said, for the knotweed, those are just beginning to go on to trial, and it's been pretty successful. But yeah, that's not something that I'm like, well, I'll just drive to China and get this bug and it'll be cool. It'll be fine. No, what could possibly happen? The soybean beetle that was introduced to control the kudzu eats soybeans. So yes, there's always a danger with biocontrols, and it has to be like super, super careful. Yes.
This is a question from the Zoom crowd. So we see invasive plants in the parks because they're out there. What can we do and what can we not do? If you know your privet, you know your whatever.
Asking for a friend. Yeah. So if you see an invasive plant in a park, what can you do? What can you not do? The policy answer.
We are recording.
Oh, I'm with Durham County. The policy answer is we have a very robust Adopt a Park program. And if somebody does want to get involved in their neighborhood park, and we love that because the people that are near our parks and greenways and use them often, they're going to see the problems well before we do. And they're also going to have maybe a little bit more time and bandwidth because they're so close to it, whereas we're kind of spread out. So you can contact me. I'll put you in touch with our volunteer services. It's a very, very easy process. It's just like an Adopt a Park, and it's sort of like being on the board. You only sign up for 1 year. And then after that, you're like, that was not value added. I have other things to do. Or that was great. I'm going to get other people involved. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and you don't necessarily have to know what you're doing because we have a lot of experts on staff that can go out and say, oh, well, if all you want to do is just do a little something, there's English ivy all over these trees every day. Just come and cut a couple of vines. Here's how you do it. Here's what you need. Do that. Like there's a lot of easy things to do, whether you know your plants or not. Yeah, that's what John and I did with the Adopt a Park at Powell Drive Park. And it was just like, hey, you just sign this agreement so that everybody's covered, right, from a liability standpoint, because by the way, we have lawyers. They make everything so much fun. But everybody's covered from liability. And so people like John can go into his neighborhood park and say, I just feel like cutting some English ivy today, or I feel like pulling up some privet today, or I feel like putting some beautiful plants into our bog garden or whatever. Then everybody, they can just do it because like we trust these people. We know these people, they know what they're doing, and they can go out and do that. And it's wonderful. So yeah, please reach out, get involved.
So I'm
or just do it.
I'm scooching up next to you because your microphone is on. Anderson Point Park is our Adopt a Park. And we cover our annual requirements primarily by monitoring the bird boxes. We would love to do invasive removal days, but we need people who want to do invasive removal days. So if you're interested, please let us know, because I'd love that stuff.
Yeah, if you really want to get stabbed by a bunch of very shrubby calorie pears. Anderson Point is the place for you. I don't know if you guys have experience with calorie pears, but the thorns on them are like, oh, they're awful. And they get all shrubby and tangled. You have to crawl up underneath. Anyway.
I have another one from Zoom that wasn't actually a question, but while you were giving your presentation, they were paying attention, but they were making Elaeagnus jam. So will you talk a little bit about what your philosophy is and how we can maybe live with some of these plants that are out there? Because that is popular. I'm noticing Triangle Land Conservancy well, they're not promoting invasives, but they're mentioning, oh, by the way, all this invasive honeysuckle, you can use that. That's one way to help beat it back, is to consume it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if people want to grow it on their own property for their own uses, that's fine. And if we can't encourage foraging in our parks, because we've had people ingest things that sent them to the hospital because they didn't know how to identify, particularly at places that are near high schools. I'll just throw that out. Fletcher Park, I'm looking at you. But if people, there are ways that you can use some of these invasive plants. I know people make jelly out of kudzu as well. But that's a great way to manage maybe some of the seeds if you're using the fruit. Take it home, put it into the sewer system. I mean, that's what happens ultimately when you eat something, right? But sorry, they don't let me out a lot. But yeah, that, definitely there are ways to use some of these plants. There was even an exhibit recently of somebody using invasive plants as a medium for their art. I've seen jewelry made out of Burmese pythons. It's kind of cool. I kind of want some. But yeah, I mean, they're creative solutions, right? I mean, I'm not against it. What I'm not going to do is promote a farm of invasive species so that people can, promote the use of it. But if people absolutely want to have their invasive plant food source, absolutely on your property, just not in our parks. My favorite question. Absolutely not. So, goats are very, very useful when you don't have water around, because their scat can be deleterious to the water quality. They're useful when you have a flat-ish area and you have a species that is really palatable for their little bellies, like kudzu. And even then they have to spray the plants with like a maple honey solution in water so that they eat it, because they're like, I don't want to eat that. And that's when you have like a monoculture situation. In our parks, we don't have many situations like that. Most of our kudzu tends to be riparian kudzu, so it wouldn't really be a good site for them because of their feces. And their little hooves will stir up a seed bank like you wouldn't believe. And they have to be babysat, and there's all this. And plus there's a lot of our invasive species, because we're looking at several invasive species on sites, are actually poisonous to the goats. So the keepers wouldn't even bring them out. Vinca, for example, is really bad for them. They won't touch English ivy. And they're really good for vegetation clearing, but not invasive management, right? Because they're not very selective either. So they're going to eat the 3-foot tall dogwood as quickly as they will the 3-foot ligustrum right next to it. It's kind of hard to cage for that. So they're not a very targeted approach. They're an adorable approach. But what I would really love is a panda, because we have bamboo problems. And if you could just picture the front page of the N&O with the panda sitting, and you wouldn't have to cage them because they're not going anywhere. They're pretty lazy. They're like, this food is right here. They're just going to sit there and eat the bamboo. And wouldn't that be great? So please, everybody, sign my petition. Yeah. Yeah, no, we cut down the big one. We did cut down the big one. I did actually, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. So there was Paulonia growing at Leesville Road Park, and I cut down the big guy, but she made a bunch of babies. And now we went from one individual to 30 all over the place. And it's just going to continue to spread. And so the question is, what can we do about it? And should you call the city? And the answer is no, you should call your council member. We know that we have a problem, but we are acting at the direction of city council, and their priorities are what we have to focus on. And their priorities, now new council may be a little bit different. As council turnover happens, we get different people with different ideas and different thoughts and goals in mind. But the more they hear about it, again, it's just like the commercial enterprise. The more they hear about it, they're like, oh, government is reactive. We're not proactive. So if you say to government, this is what I want, and they hear it enough, they react. So we know we have a problem, and we're trying. I promise we're trying. Like John mentioned, I started the invasive plant program 8 years ago as one person. It is still one person, and it has remained unfilled for the year since I left. They just have offered someone the position, but it's just not a priority. And until it is made a priority for us, I can bang the drum all day, but council is like, I can't hear you from up here. So yeah.
At Raleigh, at City of Raleigh? What's the City of Raleigh, you know?
RaleighNC.gov. Oh, for council?
Social media.
Oh.
Look it up. Social media.
Yeah, there's like a Raleigh Parks. There's like all kinds of stuff out there. Yeah. I don't.
It's Native Plants Week, North Carolina Native Plants Week. Make sure we're working something. About
Yeah, just throw something at them. Throw it at them. Just inundate them. Yes, John.
My question is about crepe myrtle, and people like crepe myrtle. It is pretty. Someone once told me that I thought it was one time a native plant that was then adopted by the local crowd and spread out. Or where is crepe myrtle from? I've never looked that up.
So the question is, where's crepe myrtle from? The Latin name is Laerstromia indica, if that helps. So pretty much in the same vein as the people that say, oh, isn't English ivy native? And you're like, well, it's not called North Carolina ivy. You know, so yeah, it's a non-native plant. Yeah. Because otherwise you'd see it in the forest, right? You'd see it. But I don't see it growing in the forest. I see it growing in the meadows, which is why I'm blaming the birds.
We did.
Don't who? Wax myrtle? Wax myrtle. So wax myrtle is an evergreen native shrub. Yeah. Yeah, but they do, but it's a different plant. That's what I love, scientific names over common names, because Lord knows people could come up with some common names. Well, thank you all for being with me and listening to me prattle on. If you want to get in touch with me, or if your sidewalk is broken and you don't know who to get in touch with, we like to help. That's how you get in touch with me. It's very easy. Email me, call me, whatever you need to do. You can find me on the website. Call me right up. It's my cell phone number. I don't even have a desk phone.
That would take work that you invited Sean.
No, he's going. Did Sean go?
Sean.
Oh, we got Sean Golfer. Oh, cool.
That's why I have a note in my email to contact him. I don't know why I had a note to contact him.
Can't remember his exact.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's our land
Like
stewardship
GIS
manager. He's
stuff about the
amazing.
Natural biotic inventory biodiversity. Oh.
Yeah, so we have a great speaker for November who also is very aligned with our interests, that many of us have worked with in various capacities on the staff. But do you remember what his precise topic is, Jeff?
It was supposed to be kind of biological inventory and how they're taking those data, like our naturalist data and other data, and using it within the park system. So, and anything that we put in there, like our eBird stuff, cause we had a meeting with him about how to get it.
Okay.
And then he is supposed to pull it together, and then he was hoping, that was last year, he was hoping by this year he'd have some information to show about the natural resources, so.
Okay. So yeah, Sean's going to talk about how they use the data that we provide through various citizen science, community science apps, and so on. So and like I said, he's really closely aligned with our way of thinking in terms of protecting the national environment, and just an all-around great guy. We have a few minutes. Any interesting bird sightings? Let's see, I'll let the people on Zoom unmute themselves. Sorry, y'all, it's just, we had some Zoom bombers there back in the day, and you should be able to unmute yourselves now if you want to share a sighting from the Zoom world. Yeah, Erla says go to Lake Lynn. If you want to see warblers, if you want to see Philadelphia vireos now are around, Lake Lynn's really accessible. That's one of the things I like about it in terms of everything. You're just out on the boardwalk or the trail and it's all right there for you. But who's seen something cool lately? It's been migration. Nothing cool out there?
Winter birds are coming back, white-throated sparrows, sapsuckers, kinglets, they're all back.
Yay. And I don't know if y'all could hear that. The winter birds are back. Sapsuckers, white-throated sparrows, kinglets. I heard or I saw a creeper this weekend. What else? Robins?
Yeah.
More migratory robins coming back.
Oh, about 50 in my yard, I think.
Wow. Oh, the grosbeaks, rose-breasted grosbeaks.
Brian came home from a weekend trip and had a great cheap thrush laying in his carport. It was injured. So
Oh,
he put it in a bag to see if it would recover. I haven't heard if it did, but that was like on Sunday afternoon. It was a great cheap thrush right there. And he's over in West Raleigh.
Brian O'Shea.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, so great cheek thrushes. Brian had one. Brian Pendergast has his thrush program. Probably a lot of folks have been up to his house. Yeah, good. I have not seen a single thrush yet myself, but anything else anyone wants to share? Okay, I think that's all we have for tonight then. We've got lots of great, blue-winged teal. Oh yeah, I was out at the coast this weekend, like thousands of oh my gosh, I'm blanking on pretty little duck. Pintails. So yeah, the waterfowl are starting to make their way back. So thanks to everyone from the Zoom world to Leigh. We really appreciate your presentation, and we'll have some questions for you afterwards about specific treatments for various invasives. For the folks who are here, John Gerwin made some awesome, I haven't tried them, but I know they're going to be awesome pumpkin chocolate chip cookies. Yeah, so be sure to get one of those and stop and visit. Muffin cookies, something like that. All right, thanks.
There's apples.
And there's apples.
And there's chocolate candy from Jerry. Halloween candy.
Yep. So yeah, thanks for sharing, everyone. And apparently at Lakeland, you can get over there and see some blue-winged teals that are back too. So get out and bird. Thank you.
There's two kinds of